All right. We're here with Shelby Thomas, and we're in Surfside, Florida. Is this part of Miami?
It's, I technically don't know that question, but like the answer to that question, but it's close to Miami. Miami's right here, and it's all considered South Florida.
We have the beach behind us, and it's Earth Day. Shout out to Planet Earth, Earth Day. Why don't you briefly reintroduce yourself? We're so excited to have you back.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Shelby Thomas. Again, my organization, Ocean Rescue Alliance and 1,000 Mermaids Project, we build artificial infrastructure for coastal resilience, marine habitat, and restoration, but we also uniquely use art to connect the public back to the ocean. So we've done a lot of work here throughout South Florida, from Miami all the way up to Jupiter, and we're now really excited to be expanding projects. But we really focus on marine conservation and bringing awareness and actually creating dive sites that can connect communities.
I love it. I'm a big fan. I love, earlier, so there was an event here at this space, the community center, and there was a booth, and it's called a coral lock.
Mm-hmm.
Coral lock. So I'm playing with these coral locks, and these are innovative things within
the restoration
marine
sector
science,
that
right?
We do. Yeah. So the coral locks are one of the technologies that we work with. Essentially, we're designing a whole slew of different applications to scale marine restoration of corals, oysters, and mangroves. We have the third largest reef here in Florida in the world, and it's in dire need of restoration. So that's one of the tools that we use to outplant corals at scale. So instead of individually gluing corals down, you can simply screw them in like a bolt. And it's so easy, right? Like a 10-year-old, 5-year-old could do it. So
I could do it, yeah.
You could do it. So even as a non-diver, and if you can envision in a future, if we can do nearshore reefs that are regenerative, we could actually engage tourists and community members on a regular basis with very little training, just to be able to outplant thousands of corals at a time. That's the dream. We're working towards that. We're not doing that here in Florida yet. There's a lot of regulations that kind of have to move for that, but that's really the envisionment, is how can we create an engagement but also be able to scale more industrially to what we need to do. So you got to see a little bit in person. Last time we met, you didn't get to see any physical things that we actually do and put in the ocean. So that's pretty neat.
Last year, we recorded a year ago. We are at the Frost Science Museum. That's one of my favorite spots. So I'm gonna go there. I'm planning to go to the Bucks Heat game tonight, and the museum closes at 6, and it's right by the arena. So maybe
sneak in there.
Yeah, get some more science in before the game. But yeah, like you said, you didn't have that with you at the time.
So you really just got to visualize it, really, versus now you got to see a little bit of it.
We talked a lot of. It was such a great conversation. We talked a lot about using kind of innovative technologies to kind of pioneer some initiatives for the 21st century, and in relation to planet Earth, how it can be beneficial. What in the past year are you most proud of?
Ooh. I would say really just expanding some of the work that we're doing. We've got multiple reef sites out now. One of our first fully funded city reefs with the City of Hollywood, they graciously got engaged and supported a full reef deployment, which we're now looking at doing a second one this coming year. We recently got a co-funding with the Reef Line. We're excited to help build Reef Line up in Miami Beach, which is going to be a 7-mile underwater art park that also has all the restoration capacities that we do with Ocean Rescue Alliance work. So those are two of the really, really big reef site developments. But beyond that, we've been expanding internationally and, again, really focusing on structures that are biofunctional. So we've moved forward and had a lot of advanced research partnered with the University of Miami to look at hybrid structures that are breakwaters that actually protect against coastal erosion and create coastal resiliency. I mean, as we're sitting here now in Surfside, Florida, of course, last year, they had infrastructure in a condo collapse. And that's just, part of the inherent risk as we're facing with climate change and going all the way up the coastline to New York and areas that are already at zero sea level. Right, they're at ground zero right now, and some of them are negative. And so how are we going to combat rising sea levels and just jeopardized infrastructure? We have billions of dollars of assets and communities that rely on these coastlines. How do we create a sustainable way to protect them? And so we've been really focusing on working through collaborative partnerships and designing these breakwaters that can reduce wave energy, protect against erosion and meet that need, but at the same time create habitat and aid in restoration. So we can create these holistic sites of what I say, designing a zone for different biological purposes. So I'd say we're most proud of making more advancements in that stance of being able to actually implement at scale very realistic solutions that not only impact the marine environment in a very beneficial way, but actually meet an immediate community need that we're seeing, like dire crisis around the world, right? Even throughout Caribbean islands. And we just got back from Guyana a few weeks ago, which is 6 feet below sea level. And they have flooding regularly without heavy storms. And we're looking at doing seawall enhancements and breakwaters there to help meet that kind of climate aversion risk while creating habitat and being able to engage community at the same time. So I'd say that those 3 sectors are really what we're most proud of. And then, of course, being able to expand new programs and engage communities as well.
So there's like kind of 2 basic things, right? You're like creating artificial reef systems so that the waves aren't as impactful when they hit the land. Mm-hmm. And second is creating new habitats and space for marine species to rejuvenate in a way, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of 2 of the big purposes, right?
Yeah, those are 2 of the core fundamentals. In addition to that is doing restoration. So it's kind of what we call combining gray and green infrastructure, where you're taking a man-made, complex artificial reef that we make out of an environmentally friendly concrete, but combine that with outplanting biological species such as corals, oysters, and mangroves. Here in South Florida, we've mostly focused on corals, but we can expand to other species, and we're getting ready to do that right now on the west coast of Florida with oysters and mangroves.
So in the last year, you've scaled quite a bit.
Yes, quite a bit. We've got some of our first employees, which is awesome. I mean, we've really grassroots grown this with a lot of faith, and I think that's just a testament to the project potentials that we have in the future. I mean, our reef builder graciously donated not only his time and R&D and for construction, but actually all the materials for building our first reef. The county of Palm Beach actually donated a barge for us to get our first reef out. And so we had a collective of not only government support and academic research, for example, with the University of Miami and Nova Southeastern, that's done thousands of dollars of research in collaboration with us that's helped advance not only our work, but for us to be able to work together. So just coming from where we've grown in the last 5 years to, now really scaling up our work, actually working with government agencies under contracts and being able to hire our first employees has been really a humbling blessing, because now we're able to take that even a step further. So we're really looking forward to these projects starting, like the Reef Line and the next rendition of the City of Hollywood Reef. So we're making moves forward.
That's awesome. It's so exciting to hear too. What are the conversations like locally in Florida about climate change? Because I'm coming from Chicago in the Midwest, and climate change is a conversation, but I feel like each different region of the country and world is having their own different discussions about it. What do people talk about here the most?
Yeah, I think that's so true, because people are generally products of their environment, right? Like, so if you're not exposed to certain risk, you might not think about it, right? We're not thinking about endangered species perhaps in Africa that we've never seen, but doesn't mean that those inherent risks aren't there. In Florida specifically, we mostly are seeing, obviously, sea level changes, warming temperatures that affect our marine systems, weather, more increased frequent patterns of severe weather, like hurricanes. We got 2 this year that were very intense, that hit both coasts, really. Detrimented the Fort Myers area all the way over to even Daytona Beach, which is my hometown. We haven't gotten a hurricane in a while that's hit like that, but they had flooding inland from all of the rain. So we're really seeing the effects of, even in Miami during king tides, we'll have immense flooding. Fort Lauderdale's just flooded a week ago and probably made, at least a bunch of news stations and social media throughout the U.S. of the flooded airport for 3 days. So we're immediately seeing those impacts, and that's what's sometimes unfortunate is, I know I've probably mentioned this before when we talked, that we're typically a very reactive species as people, as humans.
We tend to be that way.
Yeah. Not as preventative and proactive, so sometimes until something's immediately in your face and it's an issue, you're not trying to actively address it. And so that's one of the things that we really want to try to pivot that mindset, and being more prepared and doing something that's regenerative, where we're not waiting for things to go to a catastrophe and trying to recover from that, right? We can build more resiliency in communities and in the environment if we're thinking, in mind and in line with what we're projecting in the future with climate change. So I think that's incredibly important, and certainly more discussions happening in Florida because we're seeing those effects right now. And I'd say Miami is like a ground zero example of where we're seeing those happen very rapidly, with flooding, warming temperatures, and disease affecting our coral reefs. We see it in a variety of different aspects. I mean, not just marine, that's of course my sector, but even from terrestrial. You look at the Everglades, and you look at the unsustainable use of water throughout the U.S. that's diverted. I mean, we even had like a Florida-Georgia water war at one point that affected our oysters in Apalachicola Bay. There's so many micro things that really contribute to like that macro picture of the effects of what we're seeing globally from climate change.
So is among the different issues, flooding is the most number one priority in resolving, or the most damaging to the infrastructure?
I would say, flooding and coastal erosion. So one of the bigger things is essentially a lot of the increased storms and wave energy actually can erode the coastline. And so what people typically do is dredge sand and dump it on shore to widen the beach, and that's called beach nourishment. It's not a sustainable practice. It's not the best for the marine environment. It's a $1 billion industry nationwide, millions of dollars per county typically, of just dumping sand. And really what that is a Band-Aid. It's a quick fix to the long-term problem of coastal erosion. And that's where, again, we're really proud to be stepping into the space of trying to design solutions that are more sustainable, not only for the environment, but the actual long-term goal of meeting that problem. And so that's where those breakwaters can come into play. And we're seeing a lot of universities, as well as, DARPA, which is the defense agency of the U.S. for research, allocated $60 million to research breakwaters to protect Navy bases on the water. And is the one doing that research on that project. So we're really excited to be one of UM's partners, and we work with them quite frequently. And just watching as this research unfolds, they have incredible work that they're doing. That will really advance the state of how we address coastal resiliency moving forward.
So you had mentioned that, us humans are more reactionary, and we're thinking less long term. How psychologically can we have discussions long term where people understand ramifications?
Mm-hmm. I think that comes from relationship building, like even within people, and that's why I fell in love with using art, because I think it's a storytelling element. Sometimes, again, people from like a very primal instinct, right? You're worried about yourself and your circle, your immediate space, and unless something is directly impeding on that, you might not be thinking about it or care or feel personally connected. And so the importance of creating these conversations that not only bring awareness, right? A lot of people are aware. They know about the problem, but they don't know ways that they can make a direct impact, help, or, you know, influence other change. I think we're needing this, what I call kind of a societal shift in perception in their relationships. And that's why we try to use art to connect deeply to communities, so it's more meaningful and it can add value that can tell a story across time that could perhaps give that different psychological connection back to the ocean. And not just the ocean. I think with any environmental project, we're more disconnected from nature than we have ever been. And I mean, aside from all the doom and gloom, I'm always an advocate of, like, I think we can solve the world's toughest things right now. We just don't have the right people together working on it. Yeah, we have children running around. It's okay.
See, we're thinking
It's
about
okay.
the children and the future
Yeah.
of the planet.
These little ones.
It's Earth Day. And
Being able to play here on the beach.
outside
you know,
on the beach.
We want this beach to stay here for the community to enjoy. And he's going to join us for the podcast too. But
Yeah.
it's okay. But, you know, really just for the future of youth and, like, being able to educate this into kids, right? I mean, I think the really fun thing, and we love working with kids programs too, is there's such an inherent nature of curiosity in children, and almost like a protection, right? Like, they love to play in the dirt and nature, and you're like a scientist as a kid. In my opinion, you're playing, you're figuring things out. And we sometimes lose that over time. And I think we need to keep that narrative going, to keep the creativity, to keep people engaged. But, you know, again, to, like, shift that perception, it takes a lot. And I think it comes from, again, that building that personal relationship with a resource.
So it makes it, with art, it's more engaging, and it's easier for people to understand, like, how they can help, or it's in, like, a different way.
I kind of view it almost like a door. You know, sometimes people, or like taking, like, step by step, you know, approach to something. Sometimes when people see this, like, very vast, vague problem, like the coral reefs are dying, you know, or Miami's going to be underwater in 8 years, or by 8 feet, you know, these very, like, drastic changes. People can't really conceptualize that from a step-to-step basis of, like, okay, well, that's going to happen. And how am I going to help that, right? And so I think the thing that we try to do is break down ways that each individual can have an impact. So, I mean, we have programs from an Adopt a Coral to, like, you can make your own reef and see that. You can put that habitat out, see the fish recruit there, see the growth happen there. And it's a very tangible, measurable thing to see. It's really beautiful because you can see that change. And so we really want to influence that everyone can have that impact. And even if you can't financially, doing something to become a better eco-conscious consumer. Share a message with a friend. There's so many things we can do as a collective, you know, even if you can't physically go and do something, right? Just a simple sharing a message can have a huge impact on a community and getting things going and integrated.
You had mentioned relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You said some phrase, perception and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I always say perception relative to, like I said, a product of your environment. Like, you know, if you go even in Florida, right? If you grew up in South Florida versus up in the Panhandle versus the middle of Florida with no coastline, you're going to have a little bit of a different dynamic of how people relate to their environment, what they do on a daily basis to interact with that. I mean, even between, like, you know, Florida and Chicago, much different experience. So that sometimes can shape our perception of, like, how we view climate change, like we were talking earlier, or how we view, like, our individual impact. You know, if you live in a city and you're not really around a bunch of environment, like trees, or, you know, you might not be thinking about that all the time. And so I think it's important to look at, you know, as a whole of, like, human society, of, like, how do we build relationships to connect people more back to nature, to where, like, they feel ownership and a responsibility, like an inherent responsibility to take care of it. And that's a hard thing to build. I mean, we've kind of done the opposite of that for years, of exploiting nature, right? Oils, fossil fuels, take as much as you can. It's a free resource, sell it, you know, and not to just discredit, like, the capitalism of that, I think there's a balance that you can still do regenerative, utilizing nature, but still being able to manage it effectively. I think like we're the really neat thing is, again, aside from all the doom and gloom and climate change, we're at the most technologically advanced state in humanity. We're collecting samples from Mars. we can solve these issues. It's just putting the right people at the table and prioritizing what we do. We just were like looping around, getting deep there.
How do you, like something I'll hear on the ground, say in Chicago, there's this doomerism. And
I haven't heard that word.
Yeah, I saw it on the internet.
Okay. Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to use that.
I'm going to take that, yeah.
So, there's kind of this gloom and darkness around, I think, people seeing something on the surface and it seeming so far away and so out of reach for their own individual action that it creates this stress and apathy and nihilism of not acting and even small actions not making an impact. How do you communicate to individuals that are within that doomerism mindset to show that there is hope?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when discussing the technology available to us, how do you communicate with someone like that for a more hopeful outlook?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question because really, ultimately, like when I connect with people who, let's say, just say don't believe in climate change, you know, you can take the extremist side and do something like a little meet their bleakness of, well, I'll give you an example. Go in a garage and keep revving a race car or your car and tell me how long you can breathe. Like, that's what we're doing to our environment. We're taking out literally things that have been compounded by thousands of years and just burning it and doing all these things without having like a proper protocol of like how much can we do and just using to the extreme. And like that kind of makes sense. Like if you're using analogies, I tend to use analogies a lot. But that's a little on the negative side. From the hopeful side, I always try to connect with a person, you know, more individually and like understanding, well, why don't you have hope, right? And sometimes that goes down to like a deeper psychological effect, right?
I think it's more of like an individual personal life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I like that even, I mean, I'm a big mental health advocate too. And I think, I mean, there's been a lot going on the last few years with COVID, you know, isolation, and like a lot of people don't get to express or even just be connected in nature. Like there's so many studies that just talk about the health of breathing or being able to meditate or just immerse yourself in nature or get active, right? Like there's plenty of literature about that effect on your body, your mental health and clarity. So I think when people do have these negative mindsets, I mean, I always try to, of course, like give my perspective, but understand, well, why? So to me, it's understanding the why rather than the what is very important, because you can like if we're mad at each other, right? And you just like know what I'm mad about. Understanding the why will prevent in the future from a disagreement happening again, or being able to understand, well, why am I upset? Like, why does that trigger me? And I think it's the same thing with somebody who has a negative experience with the environment, right? Well, why do you view it that way? Like, I'm curious. And so I actually like having conversations with people who disagree with me, because I'm genuinely curious on like seeing their perspective and why they feel that way. And I think, again, like a lot of that can be influence of where they grew up, what they're seeing in their immediate environment, what's happened in their past, and all of that, you know, does boil down to psychology. And as a whole, as we were just talking about, like, well, how do we shift this, what I call like public perception and the relationships to the natural resources? It takes a lot of work. Like, this isn't just something that's overnight. I'm sure you've heard of the term like herd mentality. Yeah. Have you heard of that? Yeah.
Classic.
Like where people collectively will like do something because everyone else is doing it. Yeah. Or if, you know, everyone started running all of a sudden, just like now where we're saying like everyone just got up and started running.
Yes.
Would you get up and run? you know, like the quick nature of people to fall into that, it's true. Like you see that there's so many studies that document that, of like people going into waiting rooms and not sitting, or you know, it's actually really interesting. And I deeply do love psychology, but I think that's a testament to the fact of like how we treat different things as a collective, like let's just say in the US, right? Different influences. So I think being able to test how can we shift that like herd mentality to be more environmental oriented, or like more accounting for your own responsibility, right? Like you have your own responsibility to your immediate environment. And I think like that's also why I really love working. You know, we were talking about art earlier as a way to impact, and like I say, like a door or window to like engage people. The project I'm most passionate about, and we're still trying to fundraise for, we've been held up with permits, is a reef in Mexico that we're working with a Mayan community. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that project is it's our first culturally relevant reef site that's driven by Mayan community for Mayan community. And I think that's so beautiful because it actually brings awareness to their culture, and it directly engages the immediate community that also has been like, suppressed. And there's so much tourism, you know, booming in Mexico. And I think that's kind of a testament to like, you know, we've all historically like come and not really worked the best with the environment. So why not like tailor this to the immediate history and community culture to engage people as a whole? And maybe they'll have more ownership now. Maybe they'll want to engage and do restoration and take care of that resource because now they're part of it. And that's the whole idea with like the Mayan reef, is now we're actually changing and giving that community a resource that they can also profit off of sustainably, but it actually helps the environment. Now we're doing a coral nursery with 2 other nonprofits there, and a fishing boat turned from fishing to doing straight coral restoration with tourists. I think that's incredible. You know, now people are paying, instead of just going on like a pretty dive, they're getting to do like a partial outplant restoration dive and then get to enjoy the beautiful reef. Like, why can't we do that with everything?
That seems like the future. Like just that image, right? Where like you're doing something positive for the environment or the community, and also at the same time creating something new and enjoyable.
And I mean, I think we can do that with many things. It's just, again, changing that relationship. Like, you know, how do kids react to that? I think if you engage little kids, like the ones running around here, they'd be happy to go be planting some Spartina grass and helping with, you know, restoring the sand dunes here. No problems asked. When you get to the like middle, high school, why is there any aversion to doing environmental work? That's probably because the collective perception of like, oh, that's not cool. That's not, you know, whatever it may be.
I feel like the younger generation, like
they're a little more
political. They're cool about.
That's true. But you know what I mean. We don't have too many people. I will say, like, there's people that volunteer in high school and stuff. At least from my graduation, right? But we don't see everyone doing this. Like,
there's
you know
maybe
what I mean?
a difference in volunteering versus like social media activism or something.
Yes. Yeah, and versus politics, you know, that's a little different. Although politics does influence like environmental regulations, but I just think it's interesting. I think kids are happy to and actually enjoy helping. Like there's a nature nurture kind of feeling that I think we get as people, where you actually genuinely feel happy when you're. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just me. Like if you're helping contribute to something, it feels good, you know. And I think kids.
How much of
you can see that in kids. They like want to help each other. I think we should be building a community that does that, you know, for the environment.
Something I often think about is as people get older, or maybe like there's a certain time where people like life and the many things that pile up on the desk of life bogs a person down, and they lose that sense of wonder and beauty of the world, whereas children have that sunny outlook still. And it's like
Yeah,
an interesting part of life.
what's kind of, well, yeah, and I mean, I think, and this is one thing I try to say, I mean, I've always said this too, I'm a big advocate of pursuing what you're passionate about, and things will figure it out. And I'm talking about like truly finding your passion and purpose, and like that's not easy to find. It doesn't just fall in your lap. You got to try a lot of things. You got to do a lot of things. Like, well, you know, I don't, maybe not like that as much. Don't feel as aligned, but truly pursuing something with your heart, I think people can see it. And I think if more people did that, it just brings out the natural creativity like we were when we were kids, you know, like that imagination and curiosity and the willingness to push and create more things. And I think as even just kind of our education system, I think we might have touched on this last time too, we sometimes like take that out of kids and like through college, and we are a little more like, I'd say, progressive in that sense now in terms of being more open-minded, but we still are not fully enabling of like that creativity of fostering that creativity in people and in youth. But I think we can get there. Again,
Energy. I feel like in terms of energy, pursuing one's passion, there's that level of energy to sustain the passion.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking of like a path. If you're trailblazing a path and you have potential energy and you're going through and you have kinetic energy, you keep kind of going. Whereas if you're not on a path that you're not passionate about, you don't have as much potential energy, mm-hmm. which then is transferred to kinetic energy to...
Yeah, I think like you can maintain more momentum when you really care about something.
Momentum. There's another great word.
Yeah, where, right, if you don't have a path, like you'd be more adverting if there's a block, right? Like you're like, well, I better stop, you know? But I think also in the same sense, again, from the, pressures of perhaps even society, I mean, it's interesting to like look at this prospectively from, I don't know how old your parents are, but my stepfather's a juvie judge, and kind of like his era is like, you're a doctor, you're an attorney.
Yeah, there's like 10 things.
There's like, and
teacher,
that is making
firefighter,
it in life.
police officer,
you know what I mean?
Lawyer, doctor.
Yeah, but that was it. Like, and I think we're way more open-minded now. I mean, people are creating jobs. I mean, even what I'm doing, I never would have assumed I'd be doing what I'm doing, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Couldn't imagine doing anything else. I mean, not really. I actually have a lot of things I want to do, but but it's just like there's no job description for what I do. Like, it's created. And I think that's what's so neat and what really excites me when I hear people talk about them wanting to start a project, start a nonprofit, start a company. I get excited to like talk through that with people, because I think there's so many pathways to make an impact, and it's keeping the focus and maintaining that momentum, but it can be hard. Like, it doesn't mean everything's just like, whatever the saying is, roses and whatever. It can be hard, and sometimes you do question yourself, and sometimes it's like, well, what if this happens and all this crashes down and this and that? And I think where you have to rely on that is just like the strong mental clarity, one, understanding your purpose, why you're doing it, and what your end goal is, and don't just kind of wash out the rest. Like, people will have their opinions. I've had people tell me, as I told you before, oh, doing the art stuff's stupid. What does that do for the environment? And I'm like, well, yeah, the artistic sculpture does not help the corals, but what it helps is bring awareness to the point where we're funding restoration through that art. So it's actually helping rebuild corals, and giving another really way to connect with people, because that's the biggest thing, is if we don't change people and how they, again, have a relationship with the environment, we're going to just be facing this continuously until we push it into the legitimate ground, So you have to start somewhere, and I think that's what's inspiring to me, again, about the art side. But, yeah.
What excites you most for the future?
Ooh. I mean, honestly, just the creative capacity. I That's what I really love about the work that I do. I get challenged, and I get to meet so many incredible people, and I get to problem solve on a daily basis. Not only from the science side, and I think that's why I love it. You know, as a scientist, you get to look at things and like, how can I dress this to be more efficient, more beneficial for that immediate environment? But again, like the art side really motivates me. So it's like, how can I make this the most impactful? Like, you know, eventually when we're big enough, like I'd love to do studies, like even psychological studies on how we can impact community and be very intentional. So I think both the creativity and intention of my work excites me the most. And seeing where that goes to. I mean, long term, I'd love to expand even beyond ocean stuff to do like sustainable infrastructure and doing this more even from a land-based perspective of like, how can we again connect with nature in a more sustainable way? So that I'd say that's my collective.
Nice.
What about you? I'm gonna reverse that.
Oh.
Uno reverse.
What was the question?
What excites you the most?
I'm
What?
excited how there's so much information and tools available at our fingertips that if you're creative enough, there's infinite possibilities. Like we had joked before, I have 4 iPhones. We're only using 3 right now. I kept one in Chicago. But to me, like in each one of these iPhones, there's more technology than what humans had to get the first person on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And here it is in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I got 4 of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, what can I do with that? And pairing up with like-minded individuals, it's almost like the 21st century and the future is a blank canvas. And it's all a matter of our mindset and imagination to create and paint the most beautiful picture that we can. And what excites me is, as a millennial, understanding the analog and digital world and this bridge that connects them, how we're at kind of this renaissance of the human story. And to me, I'm obsessed about the information revolution back in the 50s, when we could then figure out how to measure information. And it's led us, all the technology is compounded and compounded and compounded. And technology gets a bad rap because everybody, I mentioned before how like people's spines are changing because their heads are
Looking at
down
their
so
phone.
much looking at their phones. What I hope to help is people using it more intentionally, using it more as tools rather than a device to endlessly entertain
Mindlessness.
and distract and overstimulate. Right now, one can, if just sit in silence and reflect on life and what we talked about, purpose and passion. If you do it enough repeatedly and make it a habit, there's this inner source of guidance where you can figure out how to live your dreams, which was never really possible before. We live at such a interesting time in the human story, and I'm grateful for all the work and progress that has been put into this time where now I can use my mind and live my life with that. I don't have to sign up to be one of 10 of these positions. and that was deemed as successful, you can now create whatever you want. Whatever you want to be, just go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say it's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it may be harder, but again, that path, more momentum, and more excitement and energy to create that.
Mm-hmm.
So what excites me about the future is meeting other like-minded individuals who also realize that, like, what is actually happening
Mm-hmm.
in the world right now and the technology we have. How can we now use this? Let's put our minds together, use it.
Intentionally for good.
Intentionally good.
Mm-hmm.
And just create the world that we envision.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just work towards it. We have the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of that too, like, lies into, well, one, fostering creativity, but also being able to break some of those perceptions. I mean, it's taken time from, you know, like, parents' generation of those, like, very narrow-minded visions of what success is. And I think being able to break down those barriers of what success looks like, and really it's that an individualized story. It's breaking down those barriers of, like, comparing, right, to someone else and finding what you truly feel connected with. Because I think that's what brings, like, happiness, is finding that something that makes you feel creative, that brings out your inner child, that brings out your passion, your fire, your like, you know, just kind of at peace.
it makes you feel alive.
Yeah. And I think not that many people feel that way, you know, and if we had more people feeling that way, I would imagine, like, a so much more creative world. But again, like, to your point, I think it's crazy, like the iPhones, right? Like, all this crazy tech that, I don't know, 100 years ago, we'd be like, no way. You know, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And again, collecting specimens from Mars. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be making clean energy out of our own oceans that are a 24/7 consistent resource. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing things more sustainably and managing our environment better before everything's endangered. You know, it's just like, we've done all these other really crazy, outwardly, like, you know, things from even, like, space stuff, right? And I think that's also really beautiful, because we're pushing the edge of, like, what can we do as humans?
Yeah.
But, like, let's not forget about our home, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we're
Earth Day,
at
2023.
Earth Day. Let's not forget about Mother Earth.
It's kind of like that meme where the guy's, like, looking back.
Yeah.
So we're, like, with planet Earth, but then, like, Mars is like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I think there is so much hope. And I mean, I really enjoy personally, like, exploring, like, you know, friends' journeys or people that I interact with, of, like, asking things like that. Like, what do you feel connected to? What are you passionate about? And, like, you know, or even, like, what fosters your creativity? Like, where do you feel the most creative, right? And some people, it's not in their jobs. And it's a hard shift. I mean, in reality, like, we have bills to pay, we have families to support, we got XYZ. So it's not like it's an easy thing to just, well, you know, let me just toss this away. But there's definitely little things everyone can do to move forward, I think.
You had talked earlier about, like, that big, scary thing and not being able to break it down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like in one's own individual lives. Thinking about that, oh, what would I want to be or do?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's too tough. Or, well, then it's just breaking it down to the, like, atomic levels.
Yeah, and I even just actually had a friend today, you know, reach out, because I've been fortunate to, you know, now be actually expanding the for-profit arm and have some interest, and, like, really blessed to have that opportunity. And it is, like, kind of, even Evan, my co-founder of my nonprofit, sometimes will sit me down and be like, Shelby, well, one, you need to eat. Two, you should celebrate what just happened. And, like, I like, on the one side of the end, I have very audacious goals that I'm like, I'm not there yet. You know, and I'm like, step by step. But if I look back at where I was 5 years ago, it's insane.
I have that.
It's insane to look at that. You know what I mean?
Too. Yeah.
And I look back at that, and one of my friends asked, she's like, well, I just, like, don't know how to start my own company, or I don't know how to start this nonprofit that I want to do. I'm like, honestly, like, I know it sounds really scary, but do something small and manageable that you can do every day, or like one day a week, or like take it step by step, because it didn't just happen overnight. Girl, you saw me over the last 5 years come to where it is now, and it certainly is building up a great support team, right? Having someone that you can talk to. It doesn't all have to be individual on your own, but sometimes it is. I've been alone sometimes, felt alone many times, but that kind of goes back again to like, why are you doing this? What's your purpose? And that gives you that motivation in those times of like, I'm not really feeling supported right now, you know? And not that you always need to feel support, but it is something that I feel like a lot of people face when they start on a journey, or, you know, want to shift career paths. They're like, I'm 40 and I really wanted to do this with, you know, before, but, you know, now I feel like I'm too old. And I really don't think that. I kind of look at people, and I guess I'm lucky to have the mindset that I do. And it honestly started when I was younger, just like reading things like The Secret, and I really believe in energy and just having a positive, optimistic look, like subconsciously, that affects you. I mean, if you're thinking doom and gloom, like I can feel that. If I'm in an upset mood and I have the body language, right, that I'm like slouching, you would be able to see that and feel that from me, and like you might not want to talk to me as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's true with like how you carry yourself in life. But like, you know, to circle back, like I think at the end of the day, having a strong mindset and working on yourself is critical for anyone. Like going down a path of trying to find your passion or do something new. It's building resiliency within, and when you have that, you can build a much more like have more momentum when you do something, because you're not as phased by some of those roadblocks. Because you know what, some people will not understand because they're not you, you know. And I've had people say plenty of things. I'm like, it's okay, you can disagree. But
Something really valuable I've learned recently is to separate everything that someone says.
Mm-hmm.
So if a very successful person is giving advice to me, I can like separate everything that they're saying and just take the good advice and leave the bad advice. And like, because
what's applicable to you? Yeah.
They don't know you. They don't know your experiences or your mind.
Right.
So it's like, oh, that's not applicable, you know, and you can like kind of figure it out as you go. How do you like managing your day to day? This is something I'm trying to get better at.
Same.
Okay, well then that's
It's okay. You can ask
okay,
it. You can ask it. Finish your question.
So I'm trying to better organize. I'm trying to create an external system for myself so that I can build this system so that I can be as present as possible, knowing I can just fall back on this organized external system and like separate the two in a way. How do you go about scheduling? Do you keep a calendar? Do you use Google?
Oh yeah.
Okay, how do you organize, and what things do you use to organize?
So, you know, I'd say I'm not that sophisticated when it comes to organization, but I do have my calendar, and I basically live off of that in terms of meeting and scheduling, and I'll even book things months out. But I always do leave flexibility, and I will take like hard set times to just like the work-life balance of I need to spend time with my friend right now, or you know, like friends, and be present, right? Because I was at a period when, especially when I first started, where I was just so busy with everything and had so many goals to push everything forward that I would still be at a dinner working, and I'd be leaving and doing this and traveling more than I maybe needed to, and not taking a break for myself. And I did see, like, luckily not a really bad deterioration, but you know, I wasn't as healthy as I could be. I wasn't feeling as great as I could be. So I definitely try to find that balance. And I mean, I meditate, do yoga, run, workout a lot, and not as much as I would like, admittedly, but I mean, we all have, you know, wax and wanes of when we're really on it versus when we're not. But I do keep a schedule on my Outlook, Google Calendar, and I schedule things out, and I will try to take things like sometimes a few days. I work a lot on the weekends, clearly, even this weekend too.
Yeah.
But, it's not work to me, and that's actually the nice thing about what I do is not very draining to me because I love it. And I'm excited for what's next. I'm like, even if it's just running into someone, actually today at this event, the table right next to us does meditative breathing exercises for both mental health with kids and being able to kind of get back to like controlling like your body and your breath and using that even for like a higher athleticism. So he works with like surfers and even SEALs, but mostly kids, which is I think awesome. And he does these little really meditative dives, and we'll even do the weights underwater, which is a totally different experience. But there's a lot of like healing that comes from that. And the ironicness is I was just talking to Evan last week because we did one meditation/yoga and then a free dive in the ocean a few months ago with this neuroscientist. She's amazing. But we want to do this more consistently, and then it just so happens the guy next to us at the table does that weekly, and we want to have more of a weekly presence that way for just mental health and interacting with the community. And that just happened today. So literally tomorrow morning I'm going to go to one of his classes. We're going to do an event next month. Like that kind of stuff excites me because we're able to work together and kind of advance the same goals and share a similar passion of connecting with the ocean and people. And just random things like that happen all the time. I mean, this is a Saturday Earth Day event in Surfside, and I just met this awesome guy and organization right next to us. So that really keeps the motivation going. And I know I just went on a long tailored loop, but so I do work weekends. But I think the important thing, again, is having that passion, scheduling out time for yourself, absolutely, because, like, you need that, right? I don't know how often you fit in work, but I almost don't see it as a strict structure.
What is that?
Oh, that's an iguana. Yeah. They're invasive in Florida. Oh. They were brought by, like, the reptile trade, and they're all over Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Yep, he's enjoying a nice little...
That's a big lizard.
Yeah. We should grab him for the camera.
I don't like holding things like that.
I mean, yeah, people that are not from Florida are like lizards. Absolutely not.
I went to Vizcaya.
Looks like little dinosaurs, right?
I love dinosaurs.
They're
not
related.
Around for me to touch.
He's related.
So I understand that. I went to Vizcaya the other day. It's like this mansion on the water built in like the early 1900s, and there's this really sexy looking lizard. See, that one looks ugly, but this one was like blue and orange. And
yes. Yeah, those are also invasive from Colombia.
Beautiful.
They are
but
beautiful.
Invasive.
We are a invasive species center in Florida for both marine and terrestrial life, just FYI. In California, but they're one of them. But they're pretty neat. But the problem with them is that they'll eat like bird eggs and affect the native bird populations, and they like take over and eat other lizards. But they're cool looking dinosaurs.
It walks like how I would imagine a dinosaur would walk.
And then in the winter, they actually, if you haven't seen it, give you guys a good thing to Google. They will freeze and fall from trees sometimes because they'll sleep in the trees. And when it gets our really like little chilly winter months in December through February, sometimes they'll fall on people. Wow. Lizards falling from trees in Florida. So, we have climate change issues, but iguanas are another one.
Yeah, he's heading over here a little bit.
He wants to be part of the podcast.
I see that. Something I ask people all the time is how do you use your Apple Watch?
Oh, really? I use my Apple Watch, sometimes for reminders, but mostly sports. So running or working out.
Yeah.
I like being able to track it. Yeah.
That's the number one response.
Fitness,
really? Yeah.
Fitness. Yeah. Otherwise, I try to keep the notifications down because it is kind of one of those like tie-ins, right? As we talked about technology, where it just tries to suck you in there. But mostly workouts.
See, I like my watch. It
looks
simple,
nicer.
Yeah.
And
Apple
you don't
doesn't
have
design
an
it like
egregious
this.
tan line like mine. They see that? Look at that.
I don't have any tan lines in general. I went to the beach
That's what you
yesterday,
get
and I was
for
like, oh wow,
Chicago.
I do not have a tan.
That's great.
What about the hat choice? Very fashionable today.
Yeah, no, I guess I sometimes wear my little artsy hats. Just you know, not the best hair day, so just
Just throw a hat on.
yeah.
Fashion. Yeah.
Yeah. Beachy. This bird also wants to join the podcast. He's been listening in right
He's
here.
been chatting a little bit.
Yeah.
What kind of tree is this?
So this is called a sea grape tree.
Okay.
So they don't have any grapes on them right now, but where there's like the pollen's extending right there, they'll have little nodules that look like grapes that will come off.
Are they edible
No.
for humans?
No, definitely don't eat them. Probably poisonous,
Oh.
but they provide good shade and they grow
Great shade. Great shade.
They grow near the beach. Yeah.
Something when I travel to places, I notice the flora fauna. So in Mexico City, a month ago, it's so stimulating to my eyes. I'm walking just down the sidewalk, and there's all these different plants I've never seen before. And there's this thing, people in the Midwest could probably share this with me. Whenever we see a palm tree, we just think it's the most amazing thing. Because
I've
we
heard
get
that.
visions of vacation and warm weather and
Yeah.
dreams.
And
yeah.
that's a kind of like with the productive environment thing, right? Like people in
Yeah.
Florida probably don't appreciate them as much.
Do people in Florida visualize oak trees?
No.
Think how majestic they are?
We have oak trees, though. I mean, I would say, because I've spent, some of my life and love is horses and horse country. Like, that's what I think of when I think of an oak tree is just this big network of canopying oaks and those, like, foggy, misty mornings of, like, quiet stillness, on a ranch. And that's what our Florida oaks are. But I'm sure it's very different for you guys. But I'd say maybe not all the Floridians think of that, considering most of our population is on the coastline of Florida. All of it's developed.
When I was at Vizcaya, there was these massive trees. It reminded me of like a Louisiana or something. I would imagine there, like in the swamps or something. And I was just so curious how old they were. I was thinking like 300, 400 years old.
Yeah, I'm not a tree ager, but I believe it. I mean, I've seen the redwoods in California and those massive trees, and it's just, it's incredible. It's breathtaking to see it, honestly.
What's a national park you'd like to go to?
Ooh, well, definitely a lot of them. But one of the ones I've been wanting to go to more recently, in the U.S., I haven't been to Zion and the Narrows in Utah.
Okay.
So it's kind of more of the desert topography. But, internationally, I'd love to go hike Machu Picchu. They actually were going to close down for some restoration prior to COVID, and I've just heard it's beautiful. So, I'm about any of the nature exploration.
Yeah.
Lots of ocean places I, of course, want to see. The top of my list is Raja Ampat, which is an Indo-Pacific island, one of the most pristine reefs in the world in terms of coverage and diversity and color and fish. And it's very remote, hard to reach, but would love to go there. What about you? National Park.
National Park, Redwood. You mentioned Redwood. That would be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Big fan of trees. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
I was thinking about going to the Everglades on this trip.
Oh, you should.
I'm at the point now with Miami where, like on the iPhone, when you set it up, you put like your fingerprint on there.
Yeah.
And you get the main one. And then you like fill it in with nuances. That's kind of the point I'm at with Miami, where I'm just like, I'm filling in nuances. And it's like, I've done a lot of things I've wanted to do here. Maybe I take a trip to the Everglades.
Yeah. I think you should. That people do the airboat rides, and you'll get a little tour of the different flora and fauna of the Everglades. which is pretty neat.
I'm a little
you just afraid of a
scared of the
gator?
gators, yeah. What if I fall
That's
off the boat?
You won't. See, that's the Midwesterner coming out of you.
It totally is.
And that's what I mean by product of your environment.
Yeah, there you go.
I had a roommate of mine that just, her family thought I was a crazy woman because I drive a motorcycle and dive with sharks. And like, well, I just couldn't imagine being constrained by fear. That I just have a different perspective, I guess. And I mean, there's plenty of people that fear stuff in Florida in general, but it is an interesting perspective, like of where you've grown up and what those like fears and perceptions are of the environment, of like what's dangerous, right? All of it's like
I thought a
based
lot
off of
about
fear.
that recently. I think people are like 90 to 95% a product of their environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the way. It's the way it kind of is.
Yeah, and that's the way the cookie crumbles as a...
And then it
you know
just
where that
takes-
came from?
No.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles. No?
What's that from?
It's Jim Carrey from, I think it's Bruce Almighty or something. But that's just what came to my mind as soon as you said
But that saying's been around for a little bit longer. I feel
Oh,
like.
yeah.
Okay. Last question for you.
Okay.
What are you most curious about recently?
Most curious. Well, I guess I didn't mention, but I'm extremely curious about a project we just started engaging with in Saudi Arabia called NEOM. And they're working with KAUST. We're working on an environmental coral restoration side. But the bigger project is called The Line, which is going to be a sustainable city built adjacent to the Red Sea with everything compact, supposed to have all the sustainability, regeneration. I'm just curious because, like, I've never been in that space per se of, like, how do you create these hybrid structures that are, you know, creating energy, reducing waste, made out of the best materials that are going to last the longest, you know. I'm just extremely curious into seeing how some of that master plan unfolds. And I would love to see, like, more companies in the U.S. take, like, some type of attempt. Like, even if it's one building, like, let's do something like that. So I guess that's my immediate curiosity, just because, like, we were on the topic of regenerative systems. Yeah. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm curious to always try new things and travel. But in terms of new things, I kind of wanted to... What was I wanting to try recently? Doing like a different type of yoga. Basically, it's like a silk yoga. I do acro yoga when I come to South Florida. I don't know if you've ever tried that. It's actually, if you're not into yoga as a guy, it's a good intro to it because it's partner yoga. Okay. And it really shows your relationship building. So especially if you have a partner, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, it's really a unique experience. I haven't done that with a significant other yet, but here I'll go to it and it really will show you, like, how much you trust people or you don't. Oh. And dang. So I'd encourage you to try that, but I want to explore some other avenues of yoga. These birds are really funny. Look at them. Okay. So I'd say that's what I'm curious about. The crows? I'm
curious about animals in, like, how much do they, like, know? Like, they feed off the energy of, like, a human being. So we recently have this kitten in our apartment. Okay. And I feel like... You act like it just popped up there. Did you adopt this kitten? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my roommate got it. Okay. So it's not necessarily my kitten. We have this kitten. That just okay. I just assumed, my bad. It's so, okay. So this kitten, though, it only comes out and is by me when I, like, least want it to be around. When I'm, like, recording or, like, doing my, like, morning routine, and I think it knows. And then, like, I'm paying attention to people's dogs when they're, like, coming in and out of the building and how they interact with me. Uh-huh. Because I'm wondering if animals have this, like, other sense of what's going on. I believe they do. I mean, I believe animals can feel energy,
And that's how I've even seen it with horses. I mean, that's fundamentally also like part of my beliefs, as like I mentioned earlier, on how you carry yourself and like how your mindset is. I mean, animals can feel it, undoubtedly. I mean, I always gave an example when I was teaching. I used to teach horseback riding, and when we work with some larger horses or trying to break them out, right, it's kind of about break them in terms of like being able to ride them. You really have to have a confidence and show that kind of almost authority, but not in an aggressive way, that you're comfortable with the horse, and that like that does come with from within. It's not like a fake it till you make it kind of thing, you know. But they can feel it, and they can feel if you're fearful. And the really neat thing is, and why I also know this is true in terms of feeling energy, we got to work with horses for a therapy program for kids with autism. And we had one of our advanced horses that we would do like dressage level 3 work with, which is, if you're not familiar with the horse space, there's different disciplines like dressage and reining, which I compare it to like ballet versus hip hop, right, for horses. But anyway, so this horse is a very advanced horse. Like, we'll give advanced riders a hard time. But we used him for therapy, and literally cradles the kid and just knows instantly and is like so much more cautious. And to be able to like see that shift, and even like when we were teaching kids to, you know, just blanket a horse or put a halter on or put the saddle on, your movements, your body language, just number one, even for human communication, is about 80% of our communication is how you're presenting yourself. And I think the same thing with animals. So, you know, I think they can feel it. And I've even had really unique, actually loved some of my diving experiences where I've had marine animals come to me, and I had a really neat time. Actually, probably one of my favorite dives, I went on a manta dive in Hawaii. It's a night dive because the mantas come out to feed for phytoplankton, so they put a light, and then all the mantas come and they're like doing acrobatics under the light and eating the phytoplankton. As soon as we got down, it's a 65-foot dive, so it's not something you just like shoot up from. It's not a, you know, you're sitting there watching. It's almost like a little performance underwater. As soon as we get down, I look over and there's like this little cavity of reef, and you can see a hole, and this eel comes out. It comes directly to me, and he comes, I have a video of this, I'll show you, wraps all around my leg and starts wrapping around my body, through my hair, and I just hear the girl next to me screaming through her regulator because she just that would not have been okay with her. But I was calm, and it was just a really unique experience. And then he just went on his way, but I never felt uncomfortable with it or threatened. And I've had things like that where even like graceful. Sharks have come by, and you just look them in the eyes, and that's like it's such a humbling feeling, not even out of fear, but just like being able to feel another creature, right? And I enjoy stuff like that. Some people, maybe that freaks them out, but I mean, even like, you know, like we've had some birds come and visit us. Like, I think they can feel if you have good energy versus bad energy, is my point.
This is what I think it is. Like, when I record, I set it up and I press the buttons, and I'm like, I hope this works. And I don't like disturbances. And I think they can pick up on that, so they intentionally start messing with me.
Maybe it's the universe telling you to let go some of the perfectionism of the video interface.
I think so.
Yeah. The bird and the children and the lizards were telling you that today.
Yeah. You could probably, if I like go back, I might like tense up a bit, and I'm like,
with the kids. I know, I almost invited one to come take a seat.
I just hope the buttons start and stop, you know, and to capture it.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, one of the things, it's funny because I guess because I've had a lot of negative things happen that I'm thankful for, because it's made me who I am. But one of the things I always tell people, and I honestly live by, is you can't control what happens to you in life or what other people do, or, you know, you can only control how you react to things. Yeah. And again, I know we were talking about reactivity, but in reaction to like our environment, like, you can only control yourself, and sometimes like you gotta let certain things go. and just kind of like flow, and some things happen for a reason, but and it's just a lot more peaceful that way. I think I've been at points too where I'm like a little more rigid, and have learned to kind of, you know, not kind of control and view from my perspective of like how to react to things. You know, you can take it one way or the other. At the end of the day, everything's gonna be good. You know?
Wise words from Shelby Thomas.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on again. I always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah,
with you.
yeah, we always have a good chat. So thanks for having me again. Until next time.
Until next time.